clay to reach new audiences. During this presentation, I will discuss the components of Nature Reimagined project that was developed in support of the Georgia O'Keeffe Centennial Celebration in Columbia, South Carolina during the 2015-2016 academic year. We will take a look at works created by my college students as they mirrored many of O'Keeffe's artistic practices to develop a tactile clay exhibit in a gallery setting. I will also share my experience taking the show on the road to share with students at the South Carolina School for the Blind. In order to stay relevant in a changing world, we have to engage and expand our constituencies in various ways. During the 2015-2016 academic year, Columbia College in Columbia, South Carolina celebrated the 100th anniversary of Georgia O'Keeffe's time as a professor at the college in partnership with the Columbia Museum of Art and South Carolina Educational Television. The centennial honored O'Keeffe's life by exemplifying aspects of her time and experiences at Columbia College and in Columbia, South Carolina, bridging its themes and concepts to that of today's student, artist, and citizen. Centennial plans were anchored by a main exhibition schedule that included 4 major exhibits, plus multidisciplinary programs and events that paralleled O'Keeffe's South Carolina story. As we developed exhibition plans, we sought to take a new approach in our programming. An exploration of O'Keeffe through clay proved a fitting entry point for new and returning audiences and an opportunity to tell a lesser-known narrative from O'Keeffe's life. So how does Georgia O'Keeffe fit into conversations in clay? Late in life, Georgia O'Keeffe suffered from macular degeneration, which caused her eyesight to fail. With her sight limited, working in clay provided her a means to continue to work with the shapes and forms she had long painted. An important piece of our work with the Centennial Projects was giving our students perspective on Georgia O'Keeffe's life during her time in South Carolina. She was not much older than they when she stepped off the train to teach at their school, and she was looking for an opportunity to develop her work independently, not unlike opportunities many seek out in residencies today. Of coming to South Carolina, O'Keeffe noted, "It will be nearer freedom to me than New York. You see, I have to make a living. I don't know that I will ever be able to do it just expressing myself as I want to be. So it seems to me that the best course is the one that leaves my mind freest, to work as I please and at the same time make some money. If I went to New York, I would be lucky if I could make a living, and at the same time, it would take all my time and energy. There would be nothing left that would be just myself for fun. If I can't work by myself for a year with no stimulus other than what I can get from books, distant friends, and from my own fun and living, I'm not worth much. Anyone with any degree of mental toughness ought to be able to exist without the things they like most for a few months at least." In a letter much later in life to Columbia College professor Gerald Savory, O'Keeffe recalled, "I had a room next to the aerials. I also had a room to work in for myself. In that room, I had an exhibition of the work I had done without various teachers, and when I looked at it and thought about it, I realized with each picture, I was trying to work as each teacher had taught me and wanted me to. Thinking of that, it occurred to me I had ideas of my own I had never put down before, as I had never seen things like them. It was an important time in my life, and some of my most important early drawings were made at that time at Columbia College. It started me on my way." To her friend, Anita Politzer, a South Carolina native whom O'Keeffe befriended at the Teachers College in New York City before coming to South Carolina, she wrote, "I decided I was going to begin to make drawings. I thought, well, I have a few things in my head that I never thought of putting down, that nobody else taught me, and I was going to begin with charcoal, and I wasn't going to use any color until I couldn't do what I wanted to do with the charcoal or black paint, and went on from there. Did you ever have something to say and feel as if the whole side of the wall wouldn't be big enough to say it on, and then sit down on the floor and try to get it onto a sheet of charcoal paper? Anita, I wonder if I'm a raving lunatic for trying to make these things." It was these drawings that would launch O'Keeffe's career. Alfred Stieglitz exhibited her work for the first time in his gallery, 291, in May of 1916, with the work of 2 other new artists. Soon after this group exhibition, she would receive her first solo show and would become one of only 3 artists Stieglitz devoted energies to promoting. Of these three, O'Keeffe would be the only woman. In response to one of the charcoal drawings of O'Keeffe shared with Stieglitz by Anita Politzer, who introduced him to her work unbeknownst to O'Keeffe while she was still in South Carolina, Stieglitz called them the purest, finest, sincerest things that have entered 291 in a long while. As someone with a background in both ceramics and arts management, I was really excited to have the opportunity to combine the two in a classroom setting while engaging my students in a community project. Community projects within the context of my classroom was not a new idea. In past courses, we turned a textile project into an opportunity to create sculptural garden tiles for a community garden. We also make bowls for local empty bowl fundraisers. And in my arts management class, we talk a great deal about making the arts accessible to specific populations which might otherwise be overlooked. One example that I show in my classes are clips from the Whitney Museum of Art's docent program for the blind and visually impaired. As I watched the video of teens leading peers through the museum and using objects to match textures and forms, I thought to myself, now here is an opportunity to do something unique as a teaching tool in clay. And with the Centennial Project, it became not only a tool, but also a tactile art exhibit. More and more, I see my students using computers and smartphones to pull reference material for the studio. And while these are great tools at times, I wanted my students to look around them more closely at their surroundings, to walk outside and take a new look at the objects they pass by every day. In doing so, we mirrored O'Keeffe's habit of taking long walks and collecting objects which would be used as references when creating their pieces. Additionally, we studied O'Keeffe's time at Columbia College, her tangible property, and her practice of infusing observations of the natural world into her work. O'Keeffe explained her work by saying, "You paint from your subject, not what you see. I rarely paint anything I don't know very well." What ignited her, she tells us repeatedly, was her daily experiences in nature, be they with cornstalks, trees, shells, rocks, hills, cliffs, or flowers. We looked at the marks and shapes in O'Keeffe's South Carolina drawings, along with her sculptures, in relationship to Todd Webb's photos, which would be hung around the perimeter of the gallery in our shared exhibition space. Our journey to develop a clay component to the Centennial began through the lens of the camera. The Goodall Gallery selected images of Georgia O'Keeffe taken by Todd Webb to be exhibited in Sanctuary and Spirit in the fall of 2015. Our ceramic exhibition, Nature Reimagined, was developed as a companion show. I should note as I share images of the gallery that we used white terra sigillata as a surface treatment in order to achieve a finished yet raw surface to these works. The absence of color would allow the viewer to focus on the forms and the textures rather than become distracted by traditional glazes and colors often associated with ceramic works. Viewers were invited to touch the objects as means to experience elements in the photographs and from O'Keeffe's artwork, and to look for nuances of forms and design elements that are mirrored from photo to clay. The clay works filled the center of the room and were also displayed on pedestals alongside select photos. The exhibition offered a unique way for students to mirror elements of O'Keeffe's practice into their own development as artists. It also offered a new way for our gallery audience to experience photography in clay. One could essentially step into the photograph by touching corresponding works. One could also experience their surroundings through touch, offering an opportunity not only for the sighted viewer, but also for the blind and visually impaired. In addition to sharing my experience with you, I'd also like to give you the opportunity to hear from my students in their own words through this video, which also serves to give you an additional view of the gallery space. Please play the video.
We know that late in life, Georgia O'Keeffe suffered from macular degeneration, and as she lost her sight, she began to work in sculpture. This gave her a means to take the textures, the forms, the lines that she spent her life developing in two-dimensional form to bring it into a three-dimensional surface. This exhibit is Nature Reimagined, and it's a collection of ceramic forms It's a tactile companion exhibition to our Todd Webb exhibit, Sanctuary and Spirit. We began the semester trying to put the class in the footsteps of O'Keeffe. We know that when Georgia O'Keeffe was here on the Columbia College campus, she would take long walks. She spent a good bit of time in nature, in the woods, by the river. We also know from her home in Abiquiu that she was a collector of objects, and these objects that she collected are echoed in some of the compositions in her work that we see. So the students began the semester by taking walks around campus and collecting objects. We took those objects to begin as a starting point for some of the forms.
This piece is inspired by one of Miss O'Keeffe's paintings of the New York skyline when she spent her time in New York teaching. When I was working on this piece, I thought about what it would really be like to take her two-dimensional painting and put it in a three-dimensional space. And the inside is more built up, almost like a relief, and then the front of it is more like an engraved.
I drew inspiration for this piece from Todd Webb's photograph of Georgia O'Keeffe in Twilight Canyon, and the way that the canyon just surrounded Georgia O'Keeffe and kind of made her the center of attention, but still while being the focus on the canyon itself and the nature.
This is Pueblo style based on structure on Georgia O'Keeffe when she was working on New Mexico. And I wanted to develop more in my technique to put more texture in around the ceramic itself so that it's not flat and it's more 3D so people can see there's more movements going around the structure.
We hope that the viewer will take away a different sense of O'Keeffe, a sense of the forms after having held them in their hand, a sense of the objects that O'Keeffe collected, things that inspired her work.
Let's take a closer look now at a few works from the exhibition. This is an example of one of the patterns that emerged from a handmade tool created by taking impressions during those initial walks around campus at the beginning of the semester. This project was a modification of one of my existing early assignments in beginning ceramics. Since this time, I've continued to begin this semester by giving students the opportunity to make their own stamps as tools or to use objects to make impressions directly into the clay. You may also notice, looking at this piece, that it appears to be dirty on the edges. This is the patina left on many of the pieces by the oils on viewers' hands. The patina left behind by the touch of their hands was an interesting sign of which objects were most approachable and most touched. Taking the idea of the stamp a step further, the student utilized the stamp on the sides of her form and then added a floral motif on the top to tie in O'Keeffe's work. This piece, which you heard Rebecca speak about in the video, is an example of one of the few pieces which we exhibited but asked viewers not to touch due to the delicacy of the work. You heard Lucia discuss this piece in the video. As you can see by these 4 images, students were all encouraged to start with a basic set of steps and develop the project in their own way, finding their voice just as O'Keeffe did. This is an example of another project we undertook while creating works for the exhibition. Each student was given a hollow square cut from an extruder to use as a starting point to create an O'Keeffe-inspired work. This student turned the angles into curves and made a piece reminiscent of O'Keeffe's floral works and included some references to cow skulls as well, depending on the angle of the viewer. I should note that this was a new project introduced into my classroom. I typically do not incorporate extruder work with beginning ceramic students, but in this case it offered an opportunity to give those students within a wide range of skill and ability a similar starting point. As you heard Mary Grace discuss in the video, she took the opportunity to develop her piece in response to a cityscape by O'Keeffe. Georgia O'Keeffe once said that where I was born and where and how I have lived is unimportant. It is what I have done with where I have been that should be of interest. Mary Grace did a great job pulling inspiration from one of those places that O'Keeffe showed in her cityscapes, which are less familiar to many than her iconic landscapes and flowers. Through Nature Reimagined, I also had the opportunity to develop a partnership with the South Carolina School for the Blind. It should be noted that the School for the Blind was also studying O'Keeffe's time in South Carolina during the centennial, as they had been chosen as one of 3 schools to exhibit in the Goodall Gallery in January of 2016 as part of a juried K-12 exhibition, A Natural Wonder. As students at the School for the Blind began studying O'Keeffe, I took what we learned from Nature Reimagined on the road and traveled to the upstate of South Carolina to teach a series of lessons on Georgia O'Keeffe through clay. This was an eye-opening experience for me as a seasoned ceramics instructor as I experienced clay through the engagement of these students. During my first visit, I spent time talking with the students about O'Keeffe, discussing what they had learned and the projects they were working on for their own exhibition. At this time, I learned they could only work with air dry or modeling clay since the school does not have a kiln. With this in mind, on my next trip, I brought not only some of our objects from the exhibition, which had recently closed, but also clay. Students had the opportunity to touch clay at various stages, from wet to leather hard and bone dry, as well as bisque-fired and glazed works with various surface types. After touching clay and talking about clay, each student was given their own piece to make something. They could use the stamps my students created or start from scratch. The student on the left created a delightful nest full of baby birds. It was an absolute delight to see the reaction of these students, as most were using this type of clay for the first time. At the end of the day, I took their projects back to campus and fired them. In our third session, I returned with their works in the bisque-fired state. Due to time constraints at the end of the semester, we used acrylic paint to add color. At the time of this project, I was working as an adjunct teaching ceramics in Columbia, South Carolina at Columbia College, in addition to my full-time staff role there, and also serving as an adjunct teaching arts management at Converse College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where the School for the Blind is located. In the fall, I transitioned to a full-time role teaching ceramics and arts management at Converse, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to work with the School for the Blind on a more regular basis. With my ceramic students being in closer proximity, I can also offer them that same opportunity. This project offered a means for education and outreach that touched not only our campus community, but our city and our state through the exhibition and the outreach that followed. As an instructor of not only ceramics, but arts management, this experience leaves me curious as to further means through which clay can be an entry point for overlooked audiences. There's a growing trend for accessibility programs in the visual arts and museums across the country, and we as clay artists have a unique opportunity to contribute. Thank you. And we have time for questions if anybody has any. Okay, thank you. Oh, if you'll step to the microphone.
I'm curious whether the students were exposed to the other aspects of Georgia O'Keeffe's work after she left South Carolina.
They were. This was just a small component. We took the fall as a starting point and kind of mirrored her time from the point that she came to South Carolina, and throughout the year, we took steps forward as her biography shifted within that year she was with us. And so at the end of the year, we talked a great deal about next steps and where she went after she left South Carolina.
And I was unaware that O'Keeffe did that much work in clay later in her life. Are there photographs of that available anywhere?
There are a few. There's a great resource on the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum's website. There's also some images and some articles that are posted on the Metropolitan Museum's website. And Perry Miller Adato's film shows her working with Juan Hamilton in her studio in Abiquiu.
Thank you.